Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is the place where we take stacks of data, dense research, curious lists, and, well, we try to turn them into immediately useful, applicable knowledge for you.
And today we are taking on something really fundamental. We're looking at the deep architecture of formal British English itself.
That's right. Our source material for this is a very specific curated list, the 100 most commonly used nouns in British English.
But, and this is the important part, this is not just a general list from, casual conversations or Twitter.
Right.
This list is generated by some pretty rigorous frequency analysis from the British National Corpus, the BNC, and it's drawn specifically from a huge collection of formal documents.
And that context, formal documents, is really the entire mission for us today. When we say formal, you should be thinking about the language of contracts, of academic papers, government reports.
Corporate communications, legal texts, all of it.
Exactly. So for you listening, this is a phenomenal time-saving resource. This list of 100 nouns, it isn't just vocabulary. It's the conceptual toolkit you need to operate and, frankly, to sound well-informed in academic or business English. It's the foundational stack of concepts.
It really is. We've looked at function words before, the does and ofs, and they define the structure. But today, focusing on nouns is so valuable because these 100 words are the core objects. They're the concepts, the entities.
They're the anchors.
They're the content anchors. Everything else is built on top of them in high-level, serious communication, at least in the British context.
And the original source that inspired this, it was actually, it was a teaching tool. It had pronunciation, IPA, definitions, that sort of thing.
Very practical.
Very practical. But our goal is different. We want to extract the meaning from this raw data. If we look at the 100 most frequent concepts that British institutions rely on, what does that actually tell us?
What does it say about the formal British mindset? What are the priorities?
Exactly. What are they prioritizing?
We can see it straight away just by looking at the top 10. These are the concepts that just dominate the very beginning of the list. They're almost impossible to avoid in any formal document.
Okay, so number one, the absolute top of the list is time.
Time. The primary, inescapable anchor.
The example sentence given is simple, like, you need to hurry as we don't have much time. But in a formal context, time is the ultimate constraint, isn't it? It's the framework for everything.
Everything. Planning, budgets, legal deadlines, nothing happens outside of time.
Right behind it, or very close, at number 4, we get work, and then immediately at number 5, government.
And that juxtaposition is just so powerful. You have time as the constraint, and then immediately the corpus tells you that the two biggest concepts occupying that formal landscape are labor work and institutional authority government.
And then to round out that top 10, you get these huge philosophical and physical concepts. Number 8 is world. English is spoken all over the world. And number 9 is life. You mustn't forget to enjoy your life. The scale of these words is just immense.
It is. So that initial snapshot, it just grounds us immediately in these massive abstract constraints, time, world, life. But at the same time, it hammers home these crucial, highly structured societal pillars like work and government.
So it's not just about paperwork.
Not at all. It's addressing existence itself, social organizations, scarcity, and the authority needed to manage all of that.
Okay, let's unpack that core structure a bit more. We'll dive into our first section here, the building blocks of existence. This is going to cover roughly nouns 1 through 30.
Right, and this is where we'll see the most abstract, the most indispensable concepts for, basic structure, measurement, and interaction.
We already said time is number 1. And as you'd expect, its companions in measurement show up really quickly.
Yeah, that temporal framework is just so heavily represented. It shows an obsession with measurement in these formal contexts.
It does. Number 3 is year.
I was born in the year 1994.
And number 6 is day. I'll see you in a couple of days. And even though week shows up a bit later, at 39, the immediate dominance of time, year, and day, it just confirms that formal documents are inherently time-bound.
Financial years, daily operations, historical records, meeting schedules.
It's all about time.
But what's really fascinating here, I think, for you listening, is that the abstract concept, time at number 1, comes before every concrete unit of its own measurement. It's more frequent than year, which is at 3, and day, which is at 6.
So the idea of the constraint is more common than the unit itself.
Exactly. The idea of a temporal constraint. It suggests that formal documents are constantly talking about the necessity of time. Deadlines, schedules, scarcity, even more often than they're specifying a particular date.
That focus on constraint and necessity, that seems to carry right over into how structure is prioritized. These formal settings seem to rely so heavily on what you might call conceptual containers.
Yes, words that define organization, process, methodology.
Absolutely. Notice how high these organizational framework words are. Number 2, right at the top, is way.
She prefers to do things the easy way.
And then at 14, system. The healthcare system needs more funding. And at 17, we have group. A group of us are going out for dinner.
That is such a key insight. If time is the ultimate constraint, then way and system are the institutional tools developed to manage that constraint efficiently.
Right. The fact that system is at number 14, that's higher than abstract ideas like, well, ideas way down at 98. It's even higher than something as concrete as money at 23.
It shows that the formal BNC corpus is deeply, deeply invested in talking about organizational infrastructure. It's less about a specific outcome sometimes, and more about the approved methodology, the way, and the larger operational structure, the system.
So the formal British mind, if we can call it that based on this data, it prioritizes process over passion.
Methodology over emotion, yeah. And that concern with structure, it also extends to physical and logical location. It gives those systems a spatial home.
Which brings us to our next little cluster here, the spatial nouns. We're not just in an abstract world. We need these geographical or physical anchors.
Precisely. Number 11 is house.
We are renting a house in the countryside.
Number 15 is place. You should keep your money in a safe place. Then you've got area at 29, and even side at 36, the other side of the world.
You know, the high rank of house at number 11, coming in even higher than the more general word place at 15.
Yeah.
That's a really compelling data point.
It is.
The example sentence is, it's simple and domestic, but in formal British documents in the BNC house is almost certainly being used in the context of planning permission, property law.
Mortgages, council tax records, housing market reports, yes.
The frequency speaks to the immense economic and administrative importance of property and location.
That tracks perfectly. Place is a useful general term, sure. But house points to a specific, high-value, administratively defined structure. The need to assign legal and geographical location is extremely high in formal writing.
And if we look at the rest of the words in this top section, we start to see the tools that make all this formal stuff actually run. The nouns for analysis and exchange.
And this is where the formal value system really becomes clear. At number 20, you get information.
Let me know if you need any more information.
And at number 23, money. I would like my money back. These two are the absolute twin pillars of transactional formality.
Doesn't matter if you're in business or academia.
Nope. What's being exchanged? It's either currency or knowledge, money or information.
So this tells you as a learner something critical. If you're engaging in a formal setting, you have to master the vocabulary around the control and spread of information and money. They are the core units of value.
And right next to them are the words you need for verification and discourse. The intellectual tools. You have fact at number 22. I know for a fact that she missed the meeting.
And point at 24, I understand your point, but I don't agree with it.
A formal document has to establish facts, and it has to define the point of its argument. It's fundamental.
And yet, despite all this rigor, this focus on time, system, money, information, fact, we get to number 31. And it's thinking.
Chuckles, yes. Thing.
Please, could you pass me that thing over there? I have to admit, seeing thing rank higher than family, which is at 32, or even body at 63, is genuinely surprising.
It is, but it shows the sheer pragmatic necessity of a generic catch-all term, even when it's lawyers and academics doing the writing.
It's like a linguistic safety net.
That's a perfect way to put it. It shows that even the most structured language needs a high-frequency placeholder for objects or concepts that are, momentarily undefined, or where being specific just isn't relevant to the discussion. It's a reminder that humans are writing these documents.
So if we summarize this first block of 30 nouns, they establish the basic constraints of existence, time, life, world, then the mechanisms for organizing it, way, system, group, and finally the core units of exchange and verification information, money, fact, point.
It's the blueprint of a highly structured analytical society that really, really prioritizes measurable constraints.
Okay, so we've set up these big abstract concepts that constrain the formal world-time information system. But who creates those systems? How are they governed?
Exactly. Which takes us into section 2. And this is probably the densest and most revealing section for understanding institutional power. We're calling it the formal ecosystem, and it covers roughly nouns 31 through 60.
And this section just absolutely defines the academic and business utility of this whole list. It is saturated with the vocabulary of authority and organization.
It is. We already saw government way up at number 5, but the whole apparatus of the state and governance is just everywhere in this part of the list.
It's the defining cluster of this segment, isn't it?
Without a doubt. You see, state at 26. The state rejected the proposed legislation. That confirms the focus on the sovereign entity. Then you have council at 42.
We've sent the development plans to the council, so that's local government advisory boards.
Right. And then law at 54. We clearly broke the law.
Yeah.
And a bit further down, but still critical, minister at 75. The minister outlined the new measures.
The constant frequency of these terms just shows that a huge portion of the formal BNC corpus must be dedicated to describing institutional structure, hierarchy, and the exercise of political and legislative authority.
These aren't just general ideas. These are the specific mechanisms, the rules, and the actors. The minister, the council, who actually wield the power.
The whole formal sphere is just overwhelmingly concerned with authority.
How it's delegated, the boundaries of its implementation. But formal life isn't just political. It's also economic. And right alongside those government terms, we find the core vocabulary for commerce and enterprise.
Right. We have company at number 18. I work for a very big company. That shows the corporal structure is a very frequent subject. And then business at 27.
We need to change the way we run our business. That speaks to the economic activity itself. These words are just the lifeblood of transactional documents.
And crucially, we also see the context where they operate. Number 46 is market.
I'll go to the market to buy some bread.
And number 52, interest. The article generated a lot of interest. And interest is a perfect example of that formal duality you were talking about.
How so?
Well, the example is about general focus, but in a formal BNC context, interest so often means financial interest, right? Stakeholding, equity, a specific area of organizational concern. It's a critical financial noun.
You're absolutely right. So if you're summarizing that group for the listener, you're saying that formal British thought operates within a strict framework of economic entities, company, business.
That are constantly interacting in a defined trading context, the market.
Where they have specific financial or organizational stakes, their interest. It defines the entire economic playing field.
And speaking of playing fields, formal communication is also deeply concerned with conflict, with security, with dispute resolution.
Which by necessity creates another high-frequency cluster of words.
We find case at number 13. In most cases, the increases have been small. It's essential for legal or argumentative structure, the facts of a dispute.
Then you move down to court at 48. If you're not careful, you'll end in court, the forum for resolution.
And police at 51, the mechanism of enforcement. If you don't leave, I'll call the police.
And then there's war at number 50. They're worried about the threat of a war.
That's an interesting one. I wonder if war at number 50 is truly about literal geopolitical conflict most of the time, or if it's used more metaphorically in these formal settings.
Like the war on poverty or a trade war.
Or the war for market share.
Yeah, that's a really sharp question. My suspicion, given the BNC includes defense papers and historical analysis, is that the literal meaning is still frequent enough to drive its rank up.
But even if it's metaphorical, its presence confirms that formal discourse is frequently addressing existential threat, geopolitical instability, or profound adversarial challenges.
Right. It's about risk assessment and planning. The state apparatus government, law, police, is designed in part to prevent or manage that very threat of war.
So the high frequency just confirms that risk and dispute are central administrative concerns. And finally, this section defines how formal entities plan and execute change.
The vocabulary for managing change itself.
This sequence basically describes the entire bureaucratic cycle.
It really does. You start with order at 35. I have listed the names in alphabetical order, establishing structure, instruction.
Then development at 38. This is a normal stage of development.
Right.
That indicates progress or growth.
Then you have policy at 59. The new policy should make our processes easier. That sets the rule framework.
And it's all built on research at number 60. I've done some research into the perfect office layout. That's the crucial evidence-based foundation for all the decisions that follow.
You've just laid out a textbook definition of formal governance. Research informs development, which necessitates a policy, leading to an order for implementation.
And for you as a learner, that is such actionable knowledge. If you're drafting a formal proposal in a British context, you have to make sure your language hits that sequence.
You have to establish the research base, outline the development stage, define the resulting policy, and make sure the final order is structured and clear.
This whole group just demonstrates that the core concerns of these documents are all about control, governance, structured change, and evidence-based decision-making.
You absolutely need these systemic nouns to navigate, articulate, or, even challenge any of these institutional processes.
Okay, so we've mastered the macro-level systems, the governance, the economics. Now we need to shift our focus to Section 3, the human scale, people, body, and social context. This covers roughly nouns 61 through 80.
And these are the individuals and the groups that actually inhabit those formal structures that we've just spent all this time analyzing.
Let's start with the fundamental people nouns, because this is where we hit that interesting ranking anomaly regarding gender and generality.
Right. We noted early on that man is way up at number 7. He's a very good-looking man.
But much, much later, at number 64, we finally get the word person. She's the perfect person for the job.
And then even further down at number 90 is woman. A woman decided to complain to the authorities.
The striking thing here is that the generic, gender-neutral term, person, is used so much less frequently in this formal corpus than man.
It is, and it's not necessarily a reflection of modern social dynamics, but more likely the historical composition of the documents in the BNC.
So these formal documents, they carry the imprint of older linguistic conventions.
Exactly. Where gender-specific terms might have been used more in job titles, legal definitions, historical records, or even where man was used as a generic stand-in for all of humanity.
That subtle difference in frequency is profound, though. It tells us that while the language today is shifting towards person, the sheer weight of historical formal documentation still favors the more traditional terms.
A formal document's linguistic DNA still reflects a desire to categorize and define roles, and it often uses that older, established terminology to do it.
We also see this priority of roles over the collective when we look at the family terms.
Yeah, this is another interesting one. The general term family, the whole family is going on holiday, is at number 32. It ranks much, much higher than the specific roles,
Which are mother at 66 and father way down at 83.
That makes perfect administrative sense. Family is the unit that's relevant to taxation, to migration paperwork, social benefits, school records.
The formal documents care about the collective legal unit.
Right, not the intimate relationship between the specific parents. The individual roles, mother and father, they only really surface when the context shifts to demographics or maybe specific reports on familial structure or court cases involving children.
Okay, so moving from social roles to physicality, we get to the essential nouns for the human form. And if you're dealing with health, safety, insurance claims, medical reports, all of which are high-frequency formal document types, you absolutely need this vocabulary.
We find head at number 33. My head has been aching all day.
And hand at 34, your hands look really cold. And then body at 63. After a long shift, my whole body hurts.
The fact that head and hand ranks so much higher than the comprehensive term body is highly suggestive, isn't it?
It is. They're the most common points of interaction with the formal world. The head for mental capacity, direction, injury.
And the hand for labor, interactions, signing documents, injury reporting. Their high frequency just underscores the concern for workplace safety, labor documentation, and medical status.
And sitting right next to the word body is number 65, health. You seem to be in excellent health.
That clustering of physical nouns right next to health confirms that safety, welfare, and physical status are mandatory considerations within the BNC's formal environment.
You can't really discuss work, which was number 4, or policy at 59, without constantly addressing the physical constraints and condition of the employee or the citizen.
And all of this is nested within even larger social structures. So formal communication also has to address the foundations of collective life, which are education and society.
Absolutely. The structures that shape individuals are highly frequent. Number 21 is school. I moved to the area for the great schools.
Which shows the high importance of local administration and educational planning. And then you get education itself, the system, at number 58. I finished my formal education in 2016.
And then at the broadest collective level, we have society at 74. The program will benefit society as a whole, and community at 79. The local community supported the plans.
These terms are the essential bridge. They define how the state, from Section 2, interacts with the individual from this section. Formal documents are constantly negotiating the impact of policies on the society and the community.
So what does this whole human scale section tell you, the listener? If the government and business sections were focused on systems, this section is focused on the measurable units within those systems.
The individual and their defined role, their physical capacity, head, hand, health, and their place within that administrative collective school community.
It just confirms that even in highly formal British communication, the ultimate subject is still the organized human population.
But the focus remains on defined, categorized roles within that formal structure. Whether that role is a mother in a benefits claim, a man in a job description, or a student in a school report.
We are now moving into our final segment, Section 4, which covers the last part of the list, nouns 81 through 100.
And this section is really dedicated to the tools. The tools you need for description, for measurement, and for direction. It's the analytic vocabulary that closes out the list and allows formal communication to categorize and quantify the world.
Let's start with the language of measurement and comparison. Formal documents are constantly needing to qualify, to categorize, and to define scale.
We begin with a core concept of how institutions operate, power, at number 40. She has the power to change things.
It speaks to capacity, authority, influence, a concept that's vital for any discussion of government or company.
Then we get right into the classification nouns. These are the words you use for sorting and listing concepts when maybe precision isn't necessary, but categorization is. You have sort at 61.
What sort of music do you like?
And kind at 88. I enjoy all kinds of dancing.
You know, the inclusion of sort and kind in the top 100 is pretty significant.
It is. It proves that even the highest frequency formal vocabulary often relies on very simple, efficient nouns to handle complex categorization.
Why invent jargon when sort or kind will do the job of segmenting information?
Exactly. Efficiency often triumphs over technical complexity in high-frequency language.
We also have these spatial and conceptual markers of scale. At 71, we have level. The terrace is on the top level of the building.
Which is vital for hierarchies, tiers of authority, physical elevation. And then you have the result of an action, effect, at 85. The change in management had many positive effects.
Effect is so critical because formal documents aren't just about describing the present. They are fundamentally concerned with consequence.
Right. Every policy, every action, every law requires an analysis of its anticipated or observed effect.
Okay, moving to the abstract tools for thinking and justification. This is the critical cluster that underpins all intellectual work in academia and business. These are the final words that allow the formal mind to operate.
We find evidence at number 97. This is clear evidence of a security breach, which of course establishes the necessary basis for fact, which we saw earlier at 22.
Then, idea at 98. It would be a good idea to call them. That's the initial spark of intellectual effort.
And finally, closing out the entire list at number 100 is sense. I have a terrible sense of direction.
And that right there, that is the narrative arc of the 100 nouns. The whole journey began with the ultimate constraint, time, at number 1, the measurable reality we all inhabit.
And it concludes with the ultimate tool of internal perception and judgment, sense, at 100.
The entire formal world is framed within these two unseeable boundaries. External, measurable constraint. Time and internal, perceived understanding, sense.
And in between those two boundaries, we have the words that define action and logistics. The active vocabulary of employment and execution, tying right back to work at number 4.
This cluster is the operational language of the formal workplace. We find Job at 89. My search for a job has not been successful.
Then action at 91. We immediately took action against the misconduct.
Management at 92. Next week, I am away on a management training course. Process at 94. And act at 93.
This list confirms that the B&C's formal corpus is just deeply concerned with the administrative execution of labor. For you, the listener, if you're discussing employment or operations or bureaucracy, these 5 nouns are indispensable.
Right. You're hired for a job which is overseen by management through a defined process, which results in an action or a specific act. It's the whole chain.
And finally, we hit a genuinely peculiar and specific data point, a fascinating geographic anomaly right here in the final 20 nouns.
The inclusion of 3 of the 4 cardinal directions.
Yes, we have south at number 80. The warmer weather came in from the south.
We have north at 95. The cold winds came in from the north.
And west at 99. I live to the west of the cathedral.
North, south, and west are in the top 100, but east is absent. That is intensely specific geographical data to be so highly ranked in a corpus of general formal documents.
It is. Why would references to 3 specific directions be so common?
The inclusion of them suggests a high frequency of locational, planning, and geographic references in the BNC. These probably relate to regional government reports, planning policy, infrastructure projects.
Trade documentation, where a directional description is essential. And think about British political and economic history. Discussions of regional infrastructure often focus on the North-South economic divide.
And historical expansion or political relationships often focus on the West Wales, Ireland, the Atlantic.
The high frequency of North and South is particularly compelling, isn't it? Given the political focus on regional devolution and economic balancing across those axes in the UK.
Exactly. And the absence of East is really the key to interpretation here. If North, South, and West are so frequent, the omission of East suggests that the historical orientation or the immediate domestic focus of the corpus might prioritize references to the internal North-South divide or trade directed westwards.
It could reflect a lesser frequency of formalized discussion, specifically targeting movement or policy towards the East, which would likely include mainland Europe, at least in the composition of this historical corpus.
And that makes for a perfect final observation. It shows how the frequency of these seemingly simple nouns can actually capture complex, real-world priorities and even hint at historical biases or political focus within the documents themselves.
This has been an incredibly detailed deep dive. We've looked at what is essentially the conceptual DNA of formal British English.
I feel like if I just master this stack of words, I can finally decipher half the policy papers and financial reports that I see.
I think our core insight is pretty robust. The 100 most common nouns in formal British English reveal a culture that is obsessively concerned with institutional structure, government, company, system.
With legal and dispute mechanisms, law, court, policy case.
And with the quantification and analysis of abstract concepts, time, evidence, process, research.
It tells us that formal communication, whether it's in a university or a corporation, is fundamentally about managing constraints, like time, organizing action through a way or system, defining authority with government or minister, and establishing truth with fact and evidence.
It's a map of the structured analytical mind.
And remember the value for you as the listener. Mastery of these 100 words is instantaneous access to the core concepts you need to sound knowledgeable, structured, and authoritative in any business or academic setting in the British context.
This list removes all the clutter and just gives you the conceptual pillars you need to build on.
And as we close this deep dive, we want to leave you with one final thought to consider, something that builds directly on the material we've analyzed today.
We spent a lot of time discussing how this formal corpus prioritizes words that describe structure and process, the how and the who of society.
And we noted the inclusion of 3 cardinal directions, north, south, and west, in the top 100, and that striking omission of the 4th, east.
So here's the question. Given that the BNC documents are formal and rooted in British institutions, and considering the centuries of trade and political engagement across the English Channel into continental Europe, what does the specific geographic orientation of the most frequent locational nouns suggest about the historical focus, the internal economic orientation, or the administrative priorities embedded within the core documents of the British National Corpus?
Does the high frequency of north and south mean that the internal geography of the UK is consistently of greater administrative concern than its eastern global facing?
It's a question of where the formal attention is consistently directed and where, comparatively, it's silent.
Thank you for joining us for this essential analysis of the building blocks of formal communication. Review your notes, start applying these core nouns immediately, and we'll see you next time for the next deep dive.